Welcome to the Sourcing Industry Landscape podcast, hosted by Dawn Tura, CEO and President of Sig.
Well, folks, I want to welcome you back to the podcast series. So glad to have you all here with us today. Now, today, my guest in the studio is Rita Soni, and she is from Everest Group, and she's a principal analyst for impact sourcing and sustainability. I can't wait to tell you about her. Her focus delivers a triple bottom line lens of people, planet, and profits to global services market research, beginning with an in-depth examination of impact sourcing. Now, before joining Everest Group, she was CEO of NASCOM Foundation when the term impact sourcing was first coined, and continued to evolve the field as an advisor to B2R technologies. Rita also has held the role of country head of responsible banking at Yes Bank, where she led an award-winning business approach to CSR and sustainability. She grasped these economic development issues on the ground in early positions at Ford Foundation and America Indian Foundation after beginning her professional journey with General Electric and NBC. What a varied background you have, Rita. Her initial start as an engineer instilled her with a strong passion for the catalytic role of technology to solve social and environmental challenges within the private sector. Rita serves on the board of SAPNA New York City and is an active mentor at the New York Academy of Sciences. She holds a Master's of International Affairs from Columbia University and a Bachelor of Engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology. Wow. Welcome to the podcast, Rita.
Thank you so much.
What a background. Now, before we get started, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. And when we return, we're going to hear from our guest, Rita.
What is Sig University? We are an inclusive, internationally recognized university whose mission is to advance the procurement profession while enabling students to transform their careers through our world-class certifications. Sig University offers industry-recognized certifications programs, each offering a unique set of competencies and skills that sourcing and risk professionals need to be successful. The programs provide advanced training in subjects like strategic sourcing, supplier management, third-party risk management, intelligent automation, and more. Sig University is committed to academic excellence, which is why our students are trained alongside an international cohort, engage in discussion forums, and learn from senior practitioner faculty who leverage their deep industry experience with real-world case studies. Why Sig University? It was created originally at the request of Sig members. We knew there was a lot of training out there, but nothing designed around the ever-evolving skills and competencies that the modern sourcing and risk professional needs. The program was created through collaborating with dozens of industry experts to create a curriculum that is bold, fresh, and applicable to this day and age. If you're looking to advance your knowledge and your career, join us at Sig University.
So Rita, welcome back. I'm so excited to get to know you and for our audience to get to know you as well. So you didn't have a straight path to what you do today, but a lot of foundation experience, but GE, NBC, and then foundations. Can you just tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
Sure. It is a crooked path, but I think everything builds on everything. I entered into my professional life as an engineer, typical child of immigrant parents, striving for, those top 3 degrees. And GE was a great training ground. And I immediately started to get into this combo of social or do good and business by doing a lot in the EHS arena, on the manufacturing shop floor with my steel-toed shoes and hard hat. But eventually made my way to procurement, which, I think that was the exciting part of doing the full circle of coming to this conversation, procurement in the medical systems industry, GE Medical Systems, and eventually made my way to New York, where I started to see a lot more dots getting connected and a desire to not just have these side activities where I would have some do good stuff, but really make it my passion and my focus. So that's when I decided to go to grad school at Columbia. And initially for me, it was like, oh, the only people doing good are the whole philanthropy sector. So deep dived into the amazing nonprofits and funders that are out there. But when I got myself to India through these nonprofits, my eyes were opened to what the role of business is. So I guess maybe it's the volume and the scale of poverty that you see in India, or it's the opportunities that you also see. At that time, microfinance was just becoming really big, which explains why I ended up in banking straight out of the philanthropic world, and then eventually made it back to my own engineering world of tech for good, and got to NASCOM Foundation. So that was like the circuitous route to how I got here.
So impact sourcing, I tell people that, one of the reasons I'm so proud to be in procurement is through our outsourcing initiatives and our sourcing, we've lifted millions and millions of people out of poverty and created a middle class, both in China and in India, that was scarcely there before. And when you lift people out of poverty, people always said, it's bad for the United States to outsource to other countries. What they don't realize, though, is when people become middle class, they strive and they spend money and they strive more for the Western goods. It drives demand. And so it's actually, if you think of the full circle, it helps the economy here as well to have more people out of poverty worldwide. So tell me, so I want to really dive into, you said Everest Group, I understand, has a purpose framework, and that's something that you're working toward. Can you explain that for our audience?
I'd love to. I do want to add, though, I think the other nuance in that whole outsourcing conversation, sure, you're creating more consumers globally, but the businesses themselves are stronger because of that. So they're growing they're growing the jobs market in the US and in the developed world. So I think that's the sort of nuance. And I think that's a lot of the reason that much of business is coming together and saying, we do need to have a purpose and we do need to have a broader vision of what our role is in society. Capitalism, the old school version of capitalism, cannot continue. So at Everest Group, we have created what we're calling a purpose framework. We're combining the ideas around triple bottom line and ESG, environmental, social, and governance, but also adding that there's a business case and there's a monitoring component to what it is we think businesses should be doing. So at the heart of our purpose framework are planet and the environment, and people and society or social issues, as you would have imagined. And especially in the industry that we serve, where people driven, and we actually have such an ability to enable good impact for the environment. And then wrap around to all of this is really focusing in on profits and a business case to do these things. It's not out of the goodness of our hearts. Mm-hmm. We're an industry that has shareholders and stakeholders to report into, so it needs to be for a reason. And then keeping track and actually measuring these things, just as business does through its stock prices or its board. We have monitoring and governance as part of the other wraparound.
Yeah. So impact sourcing and ESG, the purpose framework, all of that, when you look at SIG, we have $17 trillion of spend that our members control. That's a lot of money. And if all of those dollars were working for a better cause, a cleaner earth, a better climate, helping people out of poverty, just think about what we can do as just even an association. So tell me more about what you hope to accomplish now at Everest.
So impact sourcing is a very specific term within this broader idea of procurement being impactful. So let me hone in on what impact sourcing is specifically. And I think you started off by talking about the millions of people that have been lifted out of poverty. And the conviction that I put out there, or the provocation I really put out there, is imagine if that had been done intentionally and it wasn't just with an opportunistic lens. Just imagine. And the reason that matters is because if you are intentional, there is a view on what are the training needs that need to be put in place? What are the accommodations? How do we become more inclusive with a business benefit? So impact sourcing is really about, it's a talent model where people from marginalized communities are included in the employment models of various businesses in the global business services industry. And we sort of put a few different categories of marginalized. Economically disadvantaged groups is a very clear category. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we put pretty much all women in that category because of systematic exclusion that's been there. But then, of course, there's, generally below the poverty line and marginally housed people and many other nuances under economic disadvantaged. The second group is really socially marginalized. And that's when we start getting more nuanced into minority communities. Every region sort of has their acronyms for minority communities. Here in the US, we say BIPOC. In the UK, they say BAMI. But various minority communities. That could also include LGBTQ plus communities. And we've also seen some companies honing in so specifically into people that are survivors of gender-based violence and other sort of socially marginalized groups. And then there's very holistically, systematically underemployed groups. So here we start to think about people with disabilities. We've started to hear a lot in the industry about including neurodiverse individuals, those that are on the autism spectrum, for example. We're also talking about veterans, the spouses of serving military, where there's huge unemployment issues and underemployment issues, and a very interesting group of incarcerated or those with a criminal record, where there's just systematic unemployment. There's other interesting groups that have come up too, Don. We've got refugees and migrant communities, which are extremely, we keep hearing about them in the news and we know that the numbers are growing, but they're so hard to include into our standard economy, everything from just finding banking for them. So to pay them to work for you is a challenge. There's rural and small towns that are underrepresented and just, have kind of been forgotten, but now everybody's digitally connected. So there's absolutely no reason to not include them. There's single parents or pregnant people that are often excluded. So just any group that you can imagine as not having the same opportunities as you and I have had kind of fit into this idea of, can we think about programs or even whole companies that can focus in on those communities for inclusion?
I love that. And, it's sort of saddened me when you mentioned so many underrepresented and less privileged groups, but it's so true, because you can hear a bias in people's conversation about every single one of those. There's a reason, but why we don't include them. Yeah, but they're different. Yeah, but why would we take the risk? And yet we do have that obligation as human beings and as businesses to be more inclusionary. So,
and it's not even just an obligation, Dawn. I think right now everyone's talking about the Great Resignation and saying, oh, where are all the people? Even some of my colleagues have said, oh, we have a terrible population pyramid. Where are all the babies? And what I turn around and say to them is, well, if we included all of those millions of people that I just talked about, and it translates into millions of people that are getting excluded, then we wouldn't have the talent problem that we're all talking about right now.
Yeah, no, you're so right. You're so right. And then even though this past month we just posted an additional job growth, and a lot of people are saying it's not just the Great Resignation, it's also the fact that they're getting better jobs and they're making personal choices and they're upskilling themselves. And that's where I think we have such an obligation is, as much talent that is out there, a lot of it's just lack of training, lack of, even knowing about where you should get trained. And I was listening. There's a new Ford Motor Google combination that's coming together in Detroit, and they're taking Google's coming in, and they're going to be teaching people how to code. And Ford has made a commitment to start hiring all these people. So, I grew up in Detroit, and so I know a lot of people, back there from my old school days that are not employable right now because they don't have the right skill sets, or they're employable at a very low level of pay and they want more for their families. So I think that this realization is so important. And that's why when Everest Group said that they hired you, we were so excited to get to know you, because we need more people carrying this message. And it's so important. So beyond just the talent piece, though, and we talk about ESG, can you elaborate a little bit more? So that's environmental, social, and governance. It used to be, and I'm so glad we're using ESG and not just sustainability now as well. But can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. I think when we think about the journey that companies are going through, there's a lot of language out there. And in my view, it's not about converting everyone to a particular way of thinking. But philosophically, we can think of a lot of companies' journeys being from maybe 1.0 being checkbook philanthropy and really thinking about doing good from a charitable standpoint. And then many companies started to get into this triple bottom line. Oh, it can be a win-win-win situation, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes you need to spend money to do good, but then eventually make money. Then we started to get into this idea of responsible business. So carbon neutrality, we hear so much about right now. We know that almost every large corporation is doing sustainability reporting, and they're integrating their sustainability report with their annual reports. We really see 4.0 as the ultimate, and that's really having a purpose-driven company. And in some ways, I think we have Gen X and millennials to thank for this. In some ways, it's the silver lining around silver lining around the pandemic. We really think that 4.0 is about ethical consumerism, greater business intelligence, greater transparency. And we're seeing a lot more of that happening in Europe. That's going to trickle into the way we manage business here in the US as well. So I think the exciting part of this is it's not just about risk mitigation and being on the back foot, as they say, but there's opportunity in it, as well as this ability to actually make a difference and see society as a whole and the globe as a whole. We just have this one planet.
Yeah, we only have the one. So as much space travel as they're doing, we only have one planet to live on.
Agreed.
And one planet that we have to take care of. So, we have a lot of attention on ESG, and you and I were chatting the other day. I was really worried when the pandemic hit that we were going to throw out anything around sustainability, because that's what we did in 2008. And we had started talking about carbon, and boy, I was consulting at the time. It was interesting at PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric in California. And in the lobby, there was this huge banner about going green. And it was probably like 4 stories high, and you saw it, and it was the focus, and we're going to be more green. That banner came down so fast. And in California. Now, this is 2008. It was hit hard by the recession, but the only thing we talked about after that was cost savings. It was drive down price, cost. Sustainability went out the window, and even supplier diversity went out the window. And I was really concerned with this pandemic that it would happen again. And it's been so refreshing. Not only did we have such a huge social movement, that actually became a worldwide movement, but we had the recognition of the social injustice that's going on in the world. And we had the recognition that the earth was taking a break from all of us in our vehicles, and the air was getting a little cleaner. So, early in the days, I actually thought maybe this is Mother Earth just saying I need a break. And I'm going to give you a pandemic so you all get off the roads and you shut down and you stop consuming for a little bit. But now that we're back and, business is going on, we've learned how to live in a pandemic. Is there a greenwashing?
I mean, there's no question that everyone is trying to put their best foot forward or show their best foot. And there's also no question that there's a lot of goals that are being set that are stretch goals. So the answer is yes, but I think at some stage we're going to come to a place where there's a lot more transparency. There's a lot more ability to double click on the information that you see out there that the companies are presenting. And some of that's going to come in the form of regulation, as we talked about earlier, but some of it's also going to come from the end consumer. So for us in procurement, there's one layer in between us and the end consumer. However, that's eventually going to come to us. Businesses can't make a fully green or purpose-driven company without demonstrating it throughout their entire industry, within the entire business. So yes, there's greenwashing, but there's a lot of people that are scratching below the surface now to take a look. And I think what's also interesting is that the data now exists to do that.
Yes.
The tracking and the monitoring. And, I wish I had off the top of my head the number, but there's billions now that are going towards responsible investing. Or impact investing for that matter. So there's the one side of just being responsible and mitigating problems, but then there's this other side of actually overtly trying to do good, like these impact sourcing specialist companies that we talked about earlier. So I think between both of them and the power of that capital, we're just going to see the necessity to not greenwash and to really demonstrate that you're making a difference.
Yeah, and I hope that we do get to the point where people are going to insist on that transparency, and certainly the millennials and the younger generations are asking for it much more than the older generations, who are still, I think, more profit driven than purpose driven. And I'm hoping that can then translate through the entire workforce so that we all start paying attention to it at the level that we need to.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this again when I was living in India about all the kids learning about environmentalism in school and then coming home and telling their parents, you need to turn off the lights in that room when you leave the room. So I guess that's what's happening a few years later as that same generation now enters into the workforce and is telling all of us folks that have been around that, yeah, we need to integrate this into the way we do business. And the fact of the matter is that the potential exists. It's not as though it doesn't. Yes. And the other piece that comes with that is innovation. The amount of innovation that you're seeing that's coming out of the impact industries is incredible. And it's oftentimes, I've done a lot of work in the disability sector. So oftentimes we think about, we need to make accommodations. If you have a visual disability, we need to figure out how the computer is going to read the screen. But guess what? I'm getting older. I find it better to be able to increase the size of the font of something that I'm reading. Now, was that developed for me as my eyes deteriorate, or was that developed for a blind person? Does it matter? Fact of the matter is that it's beneficial to everyone. The same goes for ramps. The same goes for someone with a hearing impairment or neurodiversity, etc. So I think all of these things tend to merge and become mutually beneficial.
Yeah, well, I love the message that you're bringing. And I am so excited, Rita, that you are part of Everest Group and now part of Sig. So I would love to invite you back because we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but I have to keep to my timing. So I would love to have you back and have a follow-on to this conversation.
Yeah, Dawn, I would love to come back and tell you about the impact sourcing state of the market that we're going to be releasing soon, and a follow-up to the conference that you're having in the spring of 2022. My first time to a SIG conference. Yeah, I can't wait to follow up.
I can't wait. So folks, you have got to have this woman in your network, Rita Soni. She is part of the impact sourcing group now at Everest, leading them on ESG sustainability. So make sure to reach out, make sure she's part of your network, and tune into a podcast very soon. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Sourcing Industry Landscape podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Want to nominate someone for an interview? Email us at info@sig.org.